when a massive industry begins to collapse, I mean, there is usually a very obvious, undeniable visual that goes along with that decline.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Like the rusting factories and the Rust Belt.
Exactly. Or, if you think about the retail apocalypse of the 2010s, you picture those endless kind of haunting rows of empty storefronts in a dead shopping mall.
Yeah, it's a visible, tangible decay. You can literally drive past it and point at it.
Right. It's the architecture of a bygone era just sitting there, gathering dust.
Mm.
But when you look at the film and television production industry today, specifically the commercial, corporate, and brand storytelling side of it, the visual is completely upside down.
It really is. It fundamentally contradicts what's actually happening on the balance sheets.
Because, I mean, look around right now. Video is absolutely everywhere. It's inescapable. Every time you open your phone, every website you visit, you're hit with this unending river of high-quality visual content.
Which creates a fascinating and honestly almost dangerous illusion for anyone outside the industry looking in.
Oh, for sure.
You look at that sheer volume of pixels being pushed to our screens every single second, and you naturally assume that the people making this content must be living in an absolute golden age.
Right, you'd think the massive production studios, the ones with the sprawling sound stages and the famous logos, must be practically printing money right now.
But they aren't. And that is the massive seismic shift happening right under our noses.
Which is exactly what we're going to explore in today's deep dive into the source material. We have this incredible core paradox to unravel today. Huge, established legacy production companies are currently in a state of freefall.
Yeah, they are downsizing drastically, undergoing these really painful restructurings, and in many cases, just outright closing their doors permanently.
Yet simultaneously, the global demand for visual storytelling has never been higher in the history of human communication.
It's a profound contradiction. And the reason you, the listener, need to care about this, whether you're, say, a marketing director planning your next campaign, or a business leader communicating a vision, or even just a curious consumer, is that this isn't just some localized story about Hollywood studio politics.
No, not at all.
This is fundamentally a story about how trust is built in the modern economy. Understanding how companies are being forced to evolve their visual communication is critical right now.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to dissect exactly why these traditional giant production models are cracking, why small, agile, creative teams are suddenly thriving in that exact same market, and how the very nature of corporate communication is fundamentally changing.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to truly grasp the absolute vertigo some of these giant studios are experiencing right now, we can't just look at the present moment. We have to rewind the clock a bit.
Right, we have to look at the immediate past, the period that really defined the modern entertainment landscape, the peak TV era.
Yet you simply cannot understand the mechanics of this crash without understanding the specific financial architecture of the boom that preceded it.
And we really cannot overstate the magnitude of that boom. It was an era defined by unprecedented, heavily subsidized, and ultimately unsustainable hypergrowth.
It was wild to watch.
It was. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the macroeconomic environment of the late 2010s and early 2020s. We were operating in a zero-interest rate environment. Capital was incredibly cheap.
Right, money was basically free.
Exactly. And this fueled a completely wild arms race among the major streaming platforms. You had the global titans like Netflix, Amazon, Disney+, HBO, alongside massive regional players like Viaplay in the Nordic regions.
All of them locked in this brutal battle for subscriber acquisition.
Yes. And their absolute weapon of choice was original content.
It was basically a modern-day gold rush. Right?
Yeah.
Think about the mechanics of a gold rush. Suddenly, a narrative takes hold that there is unlimited gold in the hills, the gold in this case being global, recurring subscriber revenue.
Wall Street was rewarding these platforms purely for user growth, not for actual profit.
Exactly. So what happens? Everyone rushes out and buys the most massive, expensive, heavy-duty mining equipment they can possibly find. The streamers were commissioning original series, cinematic documentaries, feature films, at a pace that frankly defied logic.
And the production ecosystem, the actual companies and crews on the ground making the shows, responded exactly how any industry responds to a massive influx of capital. They scaled up.
But not just temporarily, right?
No, they scaled up structurally. This was particularly visible across Europe and the Nordic regions, but it was absolutely a global phenomenon. Production companies hired massive amounts of permanent staff to handle the sheer volume of work.
They were signing, what, 10-year commercial real estate leases on these sprawling production facilities?
Exactly. Sound stages, huge offices. They invested millions in incredibly complex, heavy production pipelines. I mean, the digital infrastructure, the rendering servers, the specialized software licenses required to handle simultaneous 4K post-production workflows.
They just assumed the money would never stop.
They really did. They built their entire organizational structures around the core assumption that this fire hose of limitless commissions from the streaming giants was simply the new normal.
Let me stop you there because I want to make sure we understand the physical reality of what that means.
Yeah.
When a studio scales up like that, they aren't just buying a few extra cameras, right? They are taking on massive, fixed financial liabilities.
Precisely. They are building a machine that requires a massive, constant caloric intake just to stay alive.
Right.
When you hire 50 permanent post-production specialists and you lease a 50,000 square foot facility in a major metropolitan area, you now have a monthly burn rate that is astronomical. Your baseline operating cost before you even yell action on a single project is in the millions.
Which brings us back to the mining analogy. Buying that giant multi-million-dollar mining machine is a brilliant business move when you are pulling literal boulders of gold out of the ground every single day.
The machine pays for itself in a week.
Exactly. But what happens when the macroeconomic environment shifts? What happens when the easy surface-level gold runs out and Wall Street suddenly decides they actually want to see a return on their investment?
Well, the market correction arrives. And it arrives violently. The streaming bubble, which had been inflating for the better part of a decade, finally hit its physical limits.
Because you simply run out of households with disposable income to subscribe to 7 different services.
Exactly. You hit a natural ceiling on global subscriber growth. And at the exact same time, interest rates began to rise globally. The era of free money ended.
Wall Street stopped rewarding platforms for operating at a loss.
Right. The mandate across every single boardroom in the streaming world violently shifted from growth at all costs to a heavy, ruthless focus on immediate profitability.
Oh, the fire hose was turned off.
Yeah.
And not just dialed back, shut down completely.
Budgets tightened practically overnight. The pace of commissioning slowed to an absolute crawl compared to the peak TV years.
Suddenly, getting a project greenlit was no longer about having a decent pitch, right?
No, it required running an intense, agonizing gauntlet of financial scrutiny. The platforms became incredibly selective. They weren't throwing tens of millions of dollars at experimental ideas to see what would stick anymore. They needed guaranteed, quantifiable returns.
I mean, they were canceling shows that were already in production. They were removing existing shows from their platforms just to take the tax write-offs.
It was brutal. And so the production companies, the ones that had fundamentally altered their DNA and taken on massive fixed liabilities to meet that peak TV demand, were left holding the bag.
But let me push back on this a little bit. Let me play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
If the market is just, correcting, why is it causing such catastrophic existential damage to these specific legacy studios? Why aren't these major production houses just looking at the landscape, having a lean year or two, tightening their belts and waiting for the storm to pass?
That is the logical assumption, but it ignores the brutal reality of the overhead trap. The structural DNA of a large-scale production company is actually its own worst enemy in a tightened market.
Because they can't just pause the spending.
Right. These aren't software companies that can just switch into a low power mode or pivot their code. They carry massive, immovable, fixed overhead.
We're talking about the permanent staff.
And not just the flashy creative directors. We are talking about human resources departments, in-house legal counsel to deal with complex union contracts, massive accounting departments to track international tax incentives.
Facilities management.
Yes. Those sprawling sound stages require heating, cooling, and security 24/7. Expensive post-production server farms require massive amounts of electricity and constant IT maintenance just to sit idle.
Wait, but aren't these massive studios the ones with the absolute best talent in the world? I mean, they have the legendary directors of photography. They have the top-tier cinema-grade camera packages.
Oh, absolutely. The master colorists, the best lighting designers.
Right. So in a tight market where commissioners are being incredibly selective, shouldn't the highest quality win out? Shouldn't the best of the best be the ones effortlessly surviving this correction? Because their work is undeniably superior.
It makes sense intuitively, but right now, in this specific economic climate, it is not a talent issue. It is fundamentally a math issue.
A math issue. Okay, explain that.
It is purely about economics. A legacy studio could employ the greatest, most visionary creatives on the planet. They could produce work that belongs in a museum. But if their business model demands a budget of $20 million just to cover the overhead of their facility and break even on a project,
It can't survive on smaller jobs.
exactly. They cannot survive in a market that is only willing to hand out $2 million commissions. It doesn't matter how brilliant the director is if the client simply does not have the budget to feed the studio's baseline infrastructure.
So they are paralyzed by their own weight. To go back to our analogy, that giant technologically advanced mining machine is just sitting there in the mud.
Yep.
It's costing tens of thousands of dollars a day in maintenance, insurance, and debt service. But the massive veins of gold it was specifically engineered to mine are just gone.
It doesn't matter that it's the best machine in the world. If the math doesn't work, the company dies. It is a systemic fracture of an outdated economic model.
Wow.
The fixed overhead model is brilliant and, frankly, entirely necessary when there is a reliable, predictable pipeline of giant, high-budget projects to keep the assembly line moving. But when that pipeline dries up, or even just constricts by 20 or 30%, the entire financial structure shatters.
Because the margins in production are
Yeah.
historically quite thin to begin with, right?
Exactly. You lose 20% of your revenue, but your fixed costs remain identical. You aren't just having a lean year, you are bleeding cash at a lethal rate. And that collapse leaves a massive, gaping vacuum in the market.
Which brings us to a really fascinating turning point in our deep dive. Because if the giant studios are paralyzed by their overhead and the major streaming platforms are pulling back their budgets, who is actually feeding the beast? As we established at the very beginning of this conversation, the overall demand for visual content, especially from brands, corporations, and B2B companies, has not slowed down. In fact, it's exponentially accelerated.
You open LinkedIn, you open a company's website, and there is high-quality video everywhere.
Exactly. So if the legacy studios are choking on their own infrastructure, who is absorbing all this ongoing massive demand?
This is where we see the rapid, almost aggressive rise of the agile creative team. Smaller, highly specialized creative studios are stepping directly into this massive void left by the paralyzing legacy studios, and they are finding incredible, highly lucrative new opportunities.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the success of these agile teams isn't just a simple matter of them being cheaper. It is much deeper than undercutting on price.
Much deeper.
It's that the fundamental needs of the clients, the brands, the tech corporations, the B2B logistics companies, have completely structurally transformed.
Right, the old model is dead to them.
Yeah, in the legacy model, a major brand would hire a massive advertising agency who would then hire a huge production studio to make one, maybe two, giant campaign films a year.
It was event marketing. You spend 8 months planning it, you spend $2 million shooting it over 3 days, and you blast it out across television and premium digital placements for the rest of the year.
It was very broadcast-centric mindset.
Yeah.
One singular, highly polished, heavily focused grouped message delivered from the mountaintop to the masses.
But that model is entirely broken for the modern brand. The modern brand doesn't want event marketing anymore. They demand continuous storytelling.
Let me give you an analogy. It is the exact difference between throwing one incredibly expensive, highly choreographed, formal dinner party once a year versus having a really engaging, ongoing, daily text thread with your closest friends.
Oh, that's a perfect way to look at it.
The legacy studios are built to cater the annual gala. They are terrible at managing the text thread. Small, agile studios are built specifically for the text thread.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize the shift. The rhythm of continuous storytelling requires a completely different operational metabolism. Brands today need an endless stream of shorter videos. They need digital-first content.
Right. Highly targeted messaging that works dynamically across their website, social channels, internal comms.
And critically, across professional networking platforms like LinkedIn, they need a video to explain a new software update on Tuesday, a video to highlight a new hire on Thursday, and a thought leadership piece from their CEO on Friday.
You cannot physically hire a massive legacy studio with a 100-person crew, 3 grip trucks, and a catering tent to shoot a 2-minute thought leadership video for LinkedIn every Tuesday.
No, the logistics would be completely absurd. The turnaround time would be far too slow, and the cost would bankrupt the marketing department in a month.
Exactly. And that is the absolute core of the agility advantage. Smaller teams operate with dramatically lower overhead. Let's look at the mechanics of how they actually function.
Right, they don't own the massive sound stages. They rent a specific location for half a day, exactly when they need it.
And they don't own $1 million worth of heavy cinema cameras that are depreciating in value every second.
Exactly. They rent the exact camera package required for that specific shoot from a rental house. They don't have layers of middle management and account executives. The director or the producer embeds themselves directly with the client's marketing team.
So they move faster, they iterate quicker, and they can adapt almost instantly to shifting client needs or sudden market trends.
Continuous storytelling is a natural, seamless fit for a team that doesn't have to feed a massive corporate machine before they even turn on a camera.
They are essentially acting as a lightweight extension of the brand's own internal communications team, rather than an external heavy vendor selling a shiny packaged commodity. But I want to dig deeper into the motivation here. Why are brands suddenly so desperate for this continuous ongoing text thread of content? Why not just stick to the big, safe, polished commercials? What is driving the client to demand this volume and frequency?
To understand that, we really have to bridge the gap to the evolving psychology of the modern consumer, and particularly the modern B2B buyer.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is that recent, highly revealing research published by platforms like LinkedIn has completely mapped out this behavioral shift. They conducted deep studies on how B2B buyers, meaning the procurement officers, the CTOs, the decision makers who are actually signing off on $2 million software contracts, how these people actually discover, research, and evaluate the companies they ultimately do business with.
And what they found absolutely turns the traditional corporate marketing playbook on its head. The critical finding is this: decision makers today actively, demonstrably trust content created by individuals far more than they trust heavily polished traditional corporate messaging from a faceless brand account.
You really have to let the weight of that sink in. The expensive corporate logo, the heavily focus grouped massive slogan, the $1 million glossy commercial with the sweeping drone shots.
It doesn't work anymore.
No. Those things actually hold significantly less trust currency than the raw, unfiltered voice of a single human being working within that organization. The buyers don't want to hear from the brand. They want to hear from the founders. They want to hear from the internal subject matter experts, the lead engineers, the product designers.
I want to ask you, the listener, to think about this in the context of your own professional life. Think about how you evaluate a brand or a potential vendor today. Let's say you're tasked with finding a new enterprise software solution for your entire team.
A high-stakes decision.
Exactly. If you pick the wrong software, your team's productivity tanks, and it's on you. So you have two options to evaluate. Option A is a $1 million cinematic commercial from a vendor. It has soaring orchestral music, a professional voiceover actor telling you how innovative and synergistic they are, and perfect lighting.
Very polished.
Right. Now, option B is a 5-minute, slightly imperfect video of the competing company's founder sitting at their messy desk, looking directly into the camera, and passionately, transparently explaining the specific design flaws they found in the industry's standard software and exactly the mechanical steps their engineering team took to fix them.
It's obvious, isn't it?
Which one actually lowers your perceived risk?
Yeah.
Which one do you inherently trust?
It is almost always the latter. And the data validates that human instinct completely. Video has become the absolute dominant tool for this kind of deep psychological evaluation.
B2B buyers are using platforms like LinkedIn not just to passively scroll through their feed, but to quietly and actively observe a company's deep expertise.
They aren't just looking for feature lists. They are using video to evaluate the company's underlying credibility and, most importantly, to see how they think.
How they think. That is the absolute golden phrase right there. Let's unpack that. A polished $1 million commercial shows you what a company wants you to see. It is a carefully constructed mask, but an authentic, continuous stream of individual-led video. You know, a product manager explaining a tough challenge, a CEO talking about a failure they learned from. That shows you how the company's brain actually works.
It reveals their problem-solving methodology. It forces the communication to become human. It has to be conversational. It cannot be a one-way lecture from a mountaintop.
Which means the entire fundamental role of video production in the corporate sector has shifted on its axis.
It has. For decades, video production in the corporate space was essentially about applying a shiny, impenetrable coat of paint to a brand.
Masking the messy realities of business.
Exactly. Hiding the imperfections and presenting an idealized, flawless, almost robotic version of the company to the world. Now, the mandate is the exact opposite. Production is no longer about the shiny coat of paint. It is about opening a clear, unobstructed window into the brand's reality.
But wait, hold on. If I am a chief marketing officer, that sounds absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
Because that reality is messy. It is inherently human, which means it is flawed. Here's the massive challenge for marketing leaders today. If the safety of corporate polish is dead, and this raw, unvarnished authenticity is the new currency of trust, how do you actually achieve that without just looking completely amateurish?
It's a very fine line.
Right. Because, let's be honest, there is a very fine line between authentic and unprofessional. You can't just have your CEO holding a shaky iPhone in a dark, echoey conference room, rambling for 10 minutes and expect a B2B buyer to watch that and hand over $1 million contract. It will backfire.
You're entirely right, and that is where so many brands are currently stumbling. The challenge for these marketing managers and brand leaders is immensely daunting.
They're being asked to do the impossible.
Pretty much. They are being given this mandate. You must produce significantly more content. You must do it far more frequently to feed the continuous text thread. You must do it with a smaller budget than the legacy days. And you must execute it in a way that builds deep, genuine trust without looking cheap.
But the opportunity hidden within that terrifying challenge is massive. Storytelling is no longer just a soft marketing buzzword. It is a hard, paramount mechanism for commercial survival.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean for the actual execution? How are the smart, agile studios actually solving this impossible math problem for these brands? How do you manufacture authenticity without making it feel manufactured?
They are executing a brilliant pivot. They are borrowing directly from the oldest, most inherently authentic, truth-seeking visual medium we have, the documentary.
Ah, okay.
The highly specialized techniques utilized in premium documentary filmmaking are directly, seamlessly translating into the boardroom and into everyday brand storytelling.
And we need to be extremely precise about what we mean when we say documentary techniques. We aren't just talking about a superficial visual style.
No, we aren't just saying, oh, take the camera off the tripod, make it handheld and shaky, and don't use lighting. That's a gimmick.
Right. We are talking about an entirely different philosophical approach to the subject matter.
Yeah.
It is a focus on deep, unvarnished authenticity through the mechanics of the production itself.
Let's break down those mechanics. Let's talk about the actual process on set. It is about centering the human perspective. In the legacy corporate video model, if you needed a video about customer satisfaction, you would literally hire an actor to play a customer, put them in a fake office, and have them read a script written by a copywriter about how great your software is.
And everyone watching knows it's fake.
Exactly. But the documentary approach says, absolutely not. You spend the time, the energy, and the journalistic rigor to find the actual real customer. You go to their actual office. You don't give them a script.
You make them comfortable enough to share their real, unscripted experience, including the frustrations they had before finding your product.
Right. Or consider how you handle the executive team. Instead of writing a dense, jargon-filled script for the CEO to stiffly read off a teleprompter, which, again, every viewer instantly recognizes and immediately tunes out, you sit the CEO down, you throw the teleprompter away, and you conduct a rigorous, empathetic interview.
You ask them the hard questions. You ask them about the moments they almost failed. You ask them what keeps them up at night.
You engage them in a real conversation to capture their genuine, spontaneous passion. You let them stumble over a word if it means capturing a moment of real realization.
It is the pursuit of emotional clarity over marketing precision. In a traditional corporate video, the goal is often this frantic exercise in cramming as many product features, synergistic buzzwords, and ROI statistics into 60 seconds as humanly possible.
It's an audiovisual brochure.
Yeah. In documentary-style brand storytelling, the goal is completely different. It is to make the audience feel something profound about the human beings behind the product.
And achieving that requires a completely different type of filmmaker. It requires a director who isn't just a technical manager of a massive crew, but someone who is deeply skilled at active listening.
A director who can adapt to the psychological state of the subject in the moment.
Precisely. Who knows when to push for a deeper answer and when to stay completely silent to let a thought breathe? They have to find the narrative thread in real time, pulling the story out of a sprawling conversation, rather than forcing reality to awkwardly fit a rigidly pre-written, focus-grouped storyboard.
Which brings us to an incredibly important point about the value of the craft itself. If we look at the entire landscape we've mapped out today, From the devastating collapse of the heavy legacy studios under the weight of their own overhead, to the agile teams operating like special forces units, to this profound rise of continuous documentary-style communication, it creates a very clear, undeniable roadmap for the future.
It really does.
Companies that can harness this insight-driven, documentary-style storytelling, the ones who strategically partner with agile teams to build that continuous text thread of deeply authentic communication, they are the ones who are going to immediately and obviously stand out.
Without a doubt.
In an incredibly crowded, noisy digital market where everyone else is shouting with polished, perfectly artificial ads, the brand that has the courage to speak like a real, flawed, passionate human being is the absolute only one anyone is going to actually listen to.
And I think it is absolutely vital to emphasize a point that is deeply woven into the reality of this transition, this massive shift, the death of the giant corporate campaign and the rise of the agile documentary approach, does not in any way represent a decline in the actual craft of filmmaking or video production.
No, not at all.
I know there are traditionalists in the industry who might look at the shift away from massive cinematic campaigns with huge lighting setups toward continuous 2-minute LinkedIn content, and they feel a profound sense of loss. They feel like the art is dying. But that is entirely the wrong perspective.
It's not a downgrade of the art form. It's a necessary pivot of the venue.
Precisely. It is a thrilling, demanding evolution of the craft. In many ways, it takes an immense amount of skill, perhaps even more inherent storytelling skill, to craft a narrative that resonates on a deep, emotional, human level when you do not have the crutch of a $2 million budget, elaborate visual effects, and a highly controlled Hollywood soundstage to hide behind.
Yeah, that's a great point.
To walk into a sterile corporate office, sit down with a nervous engineer, and capture reality in a way that distills incredibly complex business insights into an emotionally resonant, authentic, perfectly paced 2-minute video that requires brilliant, masterful storytelling.
The craft of filmmaking isn't dying. It is simply shedding its excess baggage and shifting venues, moving from the passive cinema screen to the active, hypercritical social feed.
Yes.
It is shedding its unsustainable weight. That is really the grand synthesis of our entire journey today. The video production industry isn't collapsing into the Rust Belt. The human desire for visual stories isn't fading, it's compounding.
We are simply watching a necessary, albeit painful for some legacy players, evolutionary step in the mechanics of the business.
We moved from the wild, unconstrained, zero-interest expansion of the streaming boom into a period of vital, harsh correction. And out of the ashes of that correction, a new, much healthier paradigm is emerging.
One fiercely focused on operational agility, on the rhythm of continuous engagement, and on the profound, unmatched power of documentary-style authenticity.
It is, ultimately, an incredibly optimistic outlook for the future of commercial art. We are moving rapidly into an era where raw creativity, intellectual flexibility, and a deep psychological understanding of human communication matter far, far more than sheer financial scale, heavy equipment, or massive real estate infrastructure.
The production studios and the brands that hire them that can successfully combine that raw, journalistic, creative authenticity with sharp, lean, strategic thinking are the ones perfectly positioned to completely dominate the future of content production.
And as we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as you navigate your own digital feeds this week.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We've talked extensively today about how B2B buyers and modern consumers are aggressively demanding this documentary-level authenticity. They are actively rejecting the polished, perfect corporate facade. They want to see the human experts. They want to see exactly how the company's brain works.
Yeah.
But if that trajectory continues, if the market's demand for radical transparency keeps accelerating at this current pace, how long is it until brands are forced to completely, unconditionally pull back the curtain?
What do you mean by completely? What does that look like in practice?
I mean, think about where we are right now. We are still currently at a stage where brands are ultimately curating their authenticity. Yes, they are showing the passionate founder in a documentary style, and they are talking about challenges, but they are still heavily editing the narrative.
They are still putting their best, most resilient foot forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if the audience's bullshit detector keeps getting more and more sophisticated, which it does every single day, how long until the only way to maintain ultimate trust with a buyer is to allow audiences to view your actual, unmitigated internal failures.
Wow.
Are we 5 years away from a world where a software company has to live stream their raw, unfiltered creative process? Where they have to publish the chaotic board meetings where things go wrong just to prove they are honest?
That is wild.
Right. If radical authenticity is the ultimate currency of trust, eventually some brand is going to realize that publicly showing your deepest scars is the most authentic, persuasive marketing campaign you can possibly run.
That is a fascinating and probably terrifying question about the future of corporate vulnerability. It completely redefines what marketing even is.
It's definitely something to keep a close eye on the next time you see a brand trying a little too hard to be authentic on your feed. And the next time you picture the state of the film and television production industry, do not picture the dusty, abandoned soundstage or the rusting factory.
No, picture a highly nimble crew of 3 people walking into a boardroom with a couple of cameras.
And capturing a real, unscripted conversation that might just change exactly how $1 million company does business. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. It has been a fascinating journey unpacking all of this, and we will catch you on the next one.